Be impeccable with yourself because it is you who gives power to your word.
Shit's about to go down.
I'm feeling something in my spirit.
Chats and Tatts with Aaron Della Vedova.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to Chats and Tats. Today is it's a pretty personal, deeply personal episode for me. The man I have on today, his father wrote a book many years ago that changed my life, and now his son has carried on that tradition with a number of other books, which I just finished one of them. It's amazing. A lot of you that know me well enough know that I would be what might be called a seeker. You know, I've studied philosophy and Buddhism and Catholicism and Christianity and Taoism, and now we're going to talk a little bit about the Toltecs, and that's what this author has written about. That's his life's work, his father's life's work, his family's life's work. He's more than that. He's not just a person that does that. He's a husband. He's a father. He's a Nagual, which we'll talk about what that means in the show. He's obviously an author, but more than all of it, he's probably just somebody who enjoys life, in his words, somebody who enjoys life. So please welcome my guest today, Miguel Ruiz Jr.
Aaron, thank you so much. It's an honor to be in your program. Thank you.
And thank you for saying that, but honestly, the honor is all mine. I meant every word I said in the introduction.
Gracias.
That Four Agreements, one of your father's books, really was a turning point for me in my spiritual journey. So maybe I'll go to that for just a minute. You know, for me, I grew up Catholic. For me, I saw a lot of hypocrisy in the Catholic religion, people saying one thing and doing another. And I know that exists in all spiritual realms. You know, you can't judge the message by the teacher. You know, humans are imperfect, but doesn't mean the message isn't. So nothing against Catholicism, but that drove me away from spirituality for many years. And I took up the art of anarchy. I was a punk rocker. I was like, well, if I can't find something that makes sense, then I'll just go this complete opposite way. You know, that's pretty common for a young teenage boy.
We did the same thing, my brothers and I.
Right. You got to go to anarchy first. It's phase one. And then you slowly learn this anarchy thing isn't so great either, you know. And then back to the path we go, right? And then for me, it really became a lot of Buddhism and Taoism. And then I wanted to tell you about this. I had an experience under the influence of dimethyltryptamine, DMT. And one of the questions I always had was, is there God? Is there, forget the word God. Is there some intelligence, something that made this, or is it all by chance or whatever, you know, the science perspective? And during my DMT experience, for me, I was convinced that there is God. I met what I would call angels. They spoke to me through telepathy. I recognized the world I was in. They told me I was from there. I would be coming back there. I left that experience 100% convinced that there is someone up there. There is. So that was a huge turning point, first of all. And then right after that, I got the Four Agreements, which is about the Toltec tradition. And for me, it was just amazing because I had never read something that was so distilled. After doing so much Buddhism and Taoism, and even the books I read after DMT about all the things I had seen, and it got pretty complicated. And there didn't seem to be a real clear message on how to bring that into my life practically. And then I read the Four Agreements and it was like, oh, there's four very simple things. You just follow these things and your life is going to be better for sure. So that's what I wanted to say is that's my journey. That's where I'm at still today. I just finished not your latest, but one of your books, A Mastery of Life, which I think is amazing because I think when you think about spirituality, for me, it starts with awakening, the need for knowledge. Then you get knowledge, whether it be a shaman or a guru or a book. And then you have the knowledge and you understand it, but you're not done. Then you need embodiment. And what is embodiment? Embodiment is the practice of the knowledge day to day in traffic, with arguments with your wife, all the challenges that we go through in life. You know, and I think your book, Mastery of Life, is about that to a degree. It gives you actual exercises you can do, you know, and I think that's just a great kind of the next step from the Four Agreements is to work into the more embodiment part of it, putting it into practice. So great book, by the way.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
And I'll get to your others after this show now that we're friends. Having said my little speech, I kind of want to turn it over to you. I know the first thing I want to start with, because I think a lot of the viewers are going to be wondering, what are Toltecs? Who are the Toltecs?
Well, the word Toltec is a Nahuatl word that means artist or artista, artesano. If I translate the phrase the Toltec art of transformation into 100% English, it means the artist path of transformation. I'm an artist, and the canvas for my work of art is my life. And the instrument or the art or the tools I'm going to use to create that work of art is going to be this body, this mind, the life force that animates the Nahuatl, that animates this being, my yes and my no. As a civilization, the Toltecs existed over 500 years ago. Oral tradition says that we were the ones that created Teotihuacan, but that's our oral traditions. I was born in 1975. Anything before that is just a story. Mm-hmm. But from a point of view of my family, the one that we says that we are Toltecs is my great-great-grandfather, Don Ezequiel Macias, who was born in Juanacatlan, Jalisco, just outside of Guadalajara, in the area of the land of the Mariposas, the Chichimeca tribes over there. And it is he who says we come from the descendants of Eagle Knight Aztec warriors, or that we are Nahual. So in our family, because that's what I can talk about, Don Ezequiel was born in around 1833. Sorry, 1833. And
He's your great-grandfather.
Great-great-grandfather. He's the first Mexican in the family. And what I mean by that is that his parents were born in Nueva España. And that's a question I've always asked. What do Mexicans call themselves before the Mexican independence? It's kind of like what do Americans call themselves before the American independence? What's the concepts? And I've had different languages. Some people call themselves subjects to the king. Some people to associate it with their culture. So he's the first Mexican. Okay. But under the Mexican flag. Mm-hmm. And he is the trickster. Have you ever seen the movie The Milagro Beanfield War? The image of the man with the big hat. And it's kind of like the devilish kind of prankster.
Yeah, the prankster.
That's him. That's
a major archetype.
Yes, that's him. He was a carpenter, and then years later he was the cemetery caregiver. So that's where he would teach to a select few. He would teach the tradition to a very few people. Because the shadow of the Inquisition is still around. It's still taboo to talk about anything outside the Catholic tradition. I was also raised Catholic. Mm-hmm. His son, Don Leonardo Macias, he was born in 1883. He rebelled against the tradition. It's a tradition in the family that we rebel against the tradition. So he practiced the Toltec tradition as a military soldier and a musician. So he taught to a select few people, but he taught the discipline of meditation through music. Basically, he would have you listen to a song, an orchestra song. Back in the days, it would be a full-fledged orchestra, and have you pay all your attention on one instrument. And that's how you begin to practice meditating and just being able to focus
your will.
Yeah. His daughter, my grandmother, Madre Sarita, was born in 1910 in Juanacatlan, Jalisco, and she rebelled against the tradition in her own unique way. She was born in the year the Mexican Revolution blew out. She grew up during a revolution in a war area. Her father's a soldier. There's cristeros, all these kind of things. And she became a modern-day woman. Something happened in life that she couldn't explain. She went back to the tradition, and she became a faithful curandera. In her late 40s and 50s, she came back to the tradition and paid attention to what Don Leonardo, her father, was teaching. The way my family landed in the San Diego and Tijuana area was by a presidential decree. President Lázaro Cárdenas came to Tijuana and to that area, and he saw there wasn't enough Mexican presence. It was all geared to the American tourists. So he put an order to send a troupe of orchestra troupe to play traditional Mexican music. And luckily for all of us, my great-grandfather Leonardo was the orchestra leader. Okay. So that's how we all found our way. And then we crossed the border, and my grandmother opened up a little temple called Nueva Vida in Barrio Logan, where today a coffee shop called Por Vida sits. Mm-hmm. So that little temple is where she began to share the tradition, not just to a select few, but with everyone. In 2007, the County of San Diego inducted her into the San Diego Women's Hall of Fame for keeping that tradition alive. So to a certain degree, what I'm doing is continuing her tradition. Right. Her son, Don Miguel Ruiz, and of course my Uncle Jaime as well, and some other my cousins who practice it, continued that tradition. And my father, he rebelled against the tradition. Like I said, it's a tradition to rebel against the tradition, to do our own thing, to become modern to the age we come in. He was born in 1952. He's a child of the 60s and 70s. That really impacts him. The cultural and social and political aspects of those generations. But Don Leonardo's still alive, and Don Leonardo's teaching him all these lessons. One day he has an aha moment after an accident where he nearly killed himself and his friends, but he had a moment where he couldn't explain. He left his body. He couldn't explain it. He survived, but he wanted to understand it. So at that moment, he went to Don Leonardo and Madre Sarita, and he became an apprentice. So at this point, he's a medical doctor. He's apprenticing with my grandmother in Barrio Logan, in that little temple in Por Nueva Vida. And as he becomes the apprentice, because I remember the thing about being the eldest is that I remember Dr. Miguel Ruiz, and he was very much a disciplinarian. Mm-hmm. I remember apprentice Miguel Ruiz, where she was a mixture. Then I remember the day he became Don Miguel Ruiz, when he let go of his medical practice and he began to teach the tradition, which at that point was filled with, he noticed there was a lot of fanaticism that surrounded the family at that point, because around my grandma, Madre Sarita, my grandpa, Don Ruiz. And he wanted to put it in a language she could understand. You can almost say he wanted to put it in a modern day language. Mm-hmm. And that's where the Toltec tradition, the way our family teaches it, began to filter. You can say at that point, my father would call himself a shaman, and somewhere along the way, he realized that the word itself, shamanism, was this thing that kind of trapped. So he had to let go of the concept of shamanism and just call himself a teacher, a Nahual, in order to be able to teach the tradition. And that's where the Four Agreements comes in. So the Four Agreements, from that point of view, is my father's interpretation of the teachings of the trickster of Don Ezequiel, the disciplinarian of Don Leonardo, and the woman with so much faith, which is the fire. Like my grandma Sarita, Abuelita Sarita, she passed away in 2008, and she's still the spiritual head of this family. She is still that fire. She is just the one that inspires us, because
had the passion.
She had that passion. She taught us faith. Mm-hmm. And when we talk about mastery of life and mastery of self, mastery of love, those books, we're not talking about power over something. It's about practice makes the master. If you read a cookbook and you only read the recipe, you'll never know what the meal will taste like. Mm-hmm. The only way to know is if you follow each and every step. If you succeed the first time, great. If you don't succeed the first time, great. What matters is putting it into practice. And every time you practice it, you get better. You basically get confidence. Mm-hmm. There's a certain confidence that I know I can follow the steps and something will come out. And the more you practice it, that confidence turns into trust. You can say that in cooking something is the moment you don't have to open the cookbook in order to remember the recipe. You know the recipe, and you have a confidence in yourself. You have the trust in yourself to take those steps. And you even start adding ingredients, subtracting ingredients, changing ingredients. Mm-hmm. And then from confidence to trust leads to faith. Now, in our family, faith is believing in something 100%, as opposed to blind faith. Faith for us is knowing I can do this 100% without a doubt. The more you go up this level, you're like, okay, how can I adapt? How can I pivot? And that's where I have faith in myself to adapt and follow through. So that's what we talk about when we talk about mastery. My grandmother Sarita taught us that. The secret to faith healing, to curanderismo, is the placebo effect. So someone once asked me in the Four Agreements, how can you say someone, it looks like you can have cancer and in a year you get cancer? He's like, how is that possible? Well, do you believe in the placebo effect? The person said, yes. Well, yeah, the placebo effect, you take a sugar pill and sometimes you heal. That's because you use your intent to give that opportunity for your body to heal. It's the excuse, is that magic feather for Dumbo. It's that thing that allows you. That's the key. If you understand the placebo effect in a positive way, you can also understand it in a negative way. That's what we understand as a curse.
Right.
So if you understand it from that point of view, so faith healing, in order to heal, is using your faith to heal. The doctors you see, the nurses, the therapists, the naturopaths, any worst person you use, you're using that as an instrument to heal yourself. The Nahual, exactly. So basically, we know we're not the healers. God is healing, but it's the individual who has that desire, that faith to heal themselves, and we're just simply the vessels. The main problem that the Four Agreements addresses is domestication, which is a system of reward and punishment by which we model the behavior of an individual, where if you live up to an expectation, you're worthy of a reward. And since we are emotional beings who experience the full spectrum of our emotions, that reward feels like acceptance, which feels like love. And the punishment feels like rejection, and the lack thereof of love is the way we've learned conditional love. I love you if. And
as a painter, I have paintings I've done. And I looked at the painting later and I was like, I was doing that way because I thought everyone would think it was cool.
Yeah, exactly. and we pretend to be something we're not for the sake of someone else's point of view, prejudice, or fill in the blank. Yeah. Healing from those wounds, you can say that is relearning how to take control of the work of art that is my life. So going back to the question, what is a Toltec? It is the moment where an individual discovers that I have the instruments to create the work of art I want to create. With every choice I make, I can create the most perfect hell or the most harmonious heaven, and every choice will take me in between. So when I say I'm a Toltec, I'm a creator of that work of art that is my life. And I'm the one using knowledge as an instrument to inform my choice, but I'm the one making the choice. So that is me and my brother Jose, who apprenticed from my grandmother Sarita and my father Don Miguel Ruiz.
Wow, that is a beautiful story, you've definitely answered the question: what is a Toltec? That is powerful, and it's just so much about self-love, isn't it? Like, I mean, that's where this all kind of zeroes into. Like, when you love yourself, when it's real, when you really love yourself, well, then you're authentic.
Yeah.
Because it's okay if they don't like you. It's okay if they don't approve of you. It's even okay, well, if someone loves you. Like, you know what I mean? You still remain what you are, regardless of all the accolades or all the hate.
Yeah.
And I'm getting on my own little tangent there, but I love that explanation of the Toltecs. Thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
It might be worth doing the Four Agreements. Just go walking through them, because that's the basis of all the work that's come out since then, including all the work you've done. Why don't you walk us through those? The 1, 2, 3, 4. And we don't have to go deep down the rabbit hole, but what are they?
Be impeccable with the word. Don't take things personal. Don't make assumptions, and always do your best.
Right. Let's just do a small blurb on each one. Be impeccable with your word.
To me, every word we use is an empty symbol whose definition is subject to agreement. It's actually something we were talking about before the interview. Right. Every word is an empty symbol, which means that it has an agreement. My yes and my no. All right. An agreement. The word agreement reflects the action of saying yes to something. That's what an agreement is. Just have that visual. We come together, we create a bond, and we create a relationship between you and I. The only thing that will exist between you and I are the things we both say yes to. If you say no to something or I say no to something, it will not be a part of our relationship, which means the only thing that will exist between us, just like the relationship itself, only exists for as long as we both say yes. If one of us changes that yes into a no, the relationship ceases to exist. Yep. For as long as we both say yes, the relationship exists, which means just like the relationship itself, the things that exist between both you and I are the things we both say yes to. The agreements we make with one another. That's what you can say the fabric of our relationship that makes our relationship unique is the agreements we make with one another, as well as within myself. To be impeccable with the word. If the word is an empty symbol whose definition is subject to agreement, let me change the phrasing. Be impeccable with your intent, because it's your intent that gives power to your word. The same energy you use to move your arms, to move your legs, is the same energy you use to create a thought. At the root of every belief I have in my belief system, there's a yes that gives it power. My word exists because I exist. My love exists because I exist, just like this body only exists because I'm here to manifest it. Be impeccable with your intent. I explained this to my father. This is my understanding. My father says, that's exactly what I meant. At the beginning, the word was with God and the word was good. But since you changed this, let me change it one more time. Be impeccable with yourself, because it is you who gives power to your word. So to simplify it, to not be impeccable with the word is to use my word to reinforce my domestication, my conditioning. Some people prefer the word conditioning because they say only animals are domesticated. We humans don't get domesticated. Ironically,
Semantics.
It's the same system. Reward and punishment. Is the way we learn conditional love. To be impeccable with the word is to use your word to heal yourself, to love yourself, to allow yourself to see the truth. What is the truth? Well, my favorite phrase to describe the truth is Neil deGrasse Tyson. The thing about science is the truth exists whether you believe in it or not. Whether you believe in it or not, which means the truth exists with or without me. It doesn't need me for it to exist. Mm-hmm. That's what the truth is. In contrast, a belief only exists for as long as I believe it, for as long as I say yes to it.
Right.
The moment I change that yes into a no, it ceases to exist, which means a belief doesn't exist without humanity. It doesn't exist without me. The truth exists whether without me. A black hole was going to exist whether or not we proved it existed or not. It was going to exist. Mm-hmm. That's the difference between the truth and a belief. If we're able to understand that and translate it within us, what are the truths we say yes to? That and it's gonna there are the things that can exist whether we believe it or not, versus the beliefs that says that only are there because we believe it. So when we look at ourselves in the mirror and we judge ourselves, say the perfect version of myself is to be 170 pounds, be 27 years old, and have hair like you.
Thank you.
I look at myself in the mirror and that's just not the truth. I'm 180 something, I'm 47 years old, and this is the truth of my hair. You fat, you bald fat, you old bald fat. That's the internal dialogue. Mm-hmm. If we have ever feel the sting of judgment when we look at ourselves in the mirror, that's what domestication is. We're punishing ourselves because we're not living up to an image that doesn't exist. That's
a belief.
Yeah, a belief that's only there because we believed it. Mm-hmm. And my favorite quote by Eleanor Roosevelt, no one can make me feel inferior without my consent. No one can make you feel inferior with the consent. That's actually the quote. How do we give consent? By believing it, mm-hmm. by saying yes to it, by agreeing with it. Mm-hmm. So we're so used to domestication that we'll corrupt anything. The telltale sign that we use the four agreements as an instrument of domestication is judging ourselves for taking things personal, judging ourselves for making an assumption. If you have judged yourself for taking things personal or the rest of it, welcome to the club, right, where we've used the four agreements as an instrument of domestication, thus corrupting it and turning it into the four conditions of our personal freedom. The four agreements versus the four conditions. Impeccable with the word, not being impeccable with the word. People would ask me, which one of the four agreements was the hardest one for you to follow? And it was always be impeccable with the word or taking things personal. And then I realized why they were difficult. I was pretending to be someone who was impeccable with his word and who didn't take things personal. That was not the truth. I was pretending to be something I'm not. Mm-hmm. At that moment, I've corrupted it. And if we understand how we can corrupt the Toltec tradition this way, with the four agreements, with the four conditions, you can understand how we can corrupt the teachings of Jesus, Buddha, Siddhartha, Muhammad, psychology, psychiatry, Alcoholics Anonymous, all these beautiful traditions that are there to let go of conditional love and embrace unconditional love. But we're so used to domestication that we'll corrupt it. In the same way we corrupt music, fashion, ethnicity, fill in the blank. To be impeccable with the word is understanding how I use my intent. Someone once said, to be impeccable with the word is to always say the truth. Yeah, but sometimes we say the truth with so much emotional poison that we're not being impeccable in any way, shape, or form. We're using the truth to go against us. So to me, that's what being impeccable with the word is. And right off the bat, being able to understand the difference between the four agreements and the four conditions. And all of a sudden, you be able to translate that to other things and realizing, who was my teacher who taught me that tradition? Was it someone who was practicing the agreements of that tradition, or someone who learned it by that domestication? Mm-hmm. You know, because I've witnessed, and I myself have been on both sides of that. You know, in my life, the moment I realized that's how I was corrupting the Toltec tradition in this way, is when, okay, I'm going to uncorrupt it. To a certain point, that's the basis of my books. And then I began to understand what my dad was doing. And it took me years later to understand he's talking the difference between the four agreements and the four agreements and the four conditions. So understanding that from the get-go with the impeccable of the word takes us to not taking things personal, which is to assume responsibility for someone else's will, to use someone else's word to reinforce our domestication. My favorite instrument to that lately, like I used to tell a story of my father wearing pajamas, but lately I've just realized there's a better one. When I was young and I would ask someone out on a date, if they said no, that person said their truth. No means no. I'm not into you. You're not my type. I'm not attracted to you. It's like Berger told Miranda in Sex and the City, he's just not that into you. It's if we use that pop culture reference. It's a moment you realize, okay, taking things personal looks like this. This person said no because I'm ugly, I'm balding, the way I look, I don't have that. And basically, I'm using someone else's truth to reinforce my own insecurity, my own judgment.
You're also agreeing with it.
Exactly.
You're giving your intent to the thing they just said.
Yeah. But the beautiful thing is, like, looking back, respect is they're saying their truth. I'm not that into you. And that's the truth.
Yeah.
It's their complete life has all the right to say no to us. Just like I have all the right to say no, and everyone around me has the right to say no. No means no. That's something that I learned as a teenager, and it's the truth throughout. So taking things personal from that example is basically using someone else's truth and using it to reinforce whatever conditioning I have, whatever self-doubt I have, whatever insecurity I have. That's taking things personal. I'm using someone else's word to reinforce, including the original domestication, which is basically they projected an image of who I'm supposed to be from their point of view, and I believed it through punishment and reward. So there's not taking things personal. Don't make assumptions. My favorite instrument, and I, as a graphic artist myself, I like using the Gestalt principle of closure. If you draw a circle and you don't close that circle, the mind has the capacity to project it. If you draw two sides of a triangle and you don't draw that third line, the mind has the capacity to project it. The need is, according to Gestalt principles, that the mind needs closure in order to make a choice. If you're walking on the street and it's sunny, you're going to walk in a rapid pace because you can see. Mm-hmm. And the more you can see, the easier you're able to make choices. When it's dark and there's no light, you're not going as fast. You're going a little slower because all of a sudden you can't see, but you're trying to still move forward. The mind needs some closure in order to have this information in order for me to make a choice. We use that in abstract art. It's something that allows us to interact with the audience. And in literature, is reading between the lines. The best one is mysteries. Mysteries love using Gestalt principle of closure. Who done it? Where done it? Miss Scarlet with a candlestick in the ballroom. Just trying to figure it out. Agatha Christie, stuff like that. Who did it? We create stories. My ex-girlfriend leaves me for another guy, and I have that wound, and I'm young. But I'm young. I'm 23 years old. I start a new relationship, and that relationship goes deeper. We move in together. And as a couple, you can say that we have this little habits that, couples still have. At 7 o'clock, when she got off work, she would give me a call. A habit that to this day, me and my wife still have. Whenever I land somewhere, arrive, I'm coming home. Do you need anything? Type of things. Just little things that relationships have. One day, she doesn't call. So one side of the triangle is, I know this habit. I know this little ceremony we have. At 7 o'clock, when she gets off work, she calls. The other line is, she hasn't called. The missing line is, why hasn't she called? And the mind begins to project stories. She's still at work and she can't call me. She's driving and she wants to use the phone. She's at the gym. She's with her girlfriends. She's with another guy. She's with another guy. I knew it. That explains this. That explains that. The mind, the monkey mind, as if using a popular culture here, starts reacting because a wound got triggered.
Right.
A wound got triggered. That explains this, that explains that. And all of a sudden they walk in and they come in with Thai food from Saffron. Surprise, here's my favorite meal, because it is. That's my favorite restaurant in town. And I don't even see the boxes. I look at her eyes and go, like a Mexican soap opera. An argument ensues, a fight breaks out, we break up. Years later, I'm talking to a therapist. Every person I'm with leaves me for another person. You tell the story, and the therapist stops you. It's like, wait a minute, what did she have in her hands? She had Thai food. Thai food. There was a sixth story. Had I been in a healthier place, had I not been emotionally triggered, I might have told that sixth story. I might have told 4 more for 10. She walked in through the door. 9 stories dissipate as one potential story became the truth. She didn't call because she wanted to surprise me with my meal. If I didn't tell that story, and that's what happened, 10 stories dissipate as life shows me the truth. So an assumption is a story I create and project onto the world that makes me think I know the truth, the whole truth. Now, here's the danger about believing my assumptions. I take action. And how many of our emotional wounds have been created because we believed an assumption we projected onto it? So this is one of those moments where I changed the agreement just a little bit to help me practice it better. Don't believe your assumption, because it's a story I create. Instead of saying don't make assumptions, for me it's like, okay, don't believe your assumptions. It's just a reminder that it's my story and it may not be the truth. Give life the opportunity to show you the truth. This is where we ask questions. And sometimes we're afraid to ask questions because we're afraid of the answer. In those situations, well, if you want to no longer be afraid to ask the question, face the fear of the answer. And once you face that fear, you're no longer afraid of asking that question. The best way, heartbreak, my father always told me, heartbreak is the moment the illusion ends. But it's the scalpel that allows us to heal from whatever wound that's there. In this case, be with someone who wants to be with you. That's the advice I give my children and my nieces and my nephews and the people who ask for advice. Be with someone who wants to be with you. Don't waste your time with someone who doesn't want to be with you.
Well, and as you're speaking, by the way, thank you for all of this. Like I've read your book and some of your father's books, and I feel like I'm just getting the one-on-one right now. This is awesome.
Thanks.
But, and there's so often because of our not being impeccable with our word about ourselves, we want the negative assumption to be true, right? So an example might be, I'm not lovable. So when the wife shows up with the Thai food, you almost want her to be cheating on you, because that would make your story make sense.
Yeah.
Of course she's cheating on me. I'm not lovable.
Yeah.
I'm not attractive, whatever the thing is.
Yeah.
So you're going so quickly to she's cheating on me, when if you loved yourself and you felt you were lovable, you wouldn't jump towards she's cheating on me. You would go more towards, oh, you picked up food.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it kind of circles back to this impeccability with the word, right?
Yes,
These other things rely on that central component.
Yeah.
Anybody listening right now can think of 1,000 times we've all done this.
Yeah.
It's, and it's just it's great. It's a great lesson to learn. And it's a very simple way of looking at it and catching ourselves in the moment when we're doing it. Of course, that's always the hardest part, right? Putting it into action.
And the nice way, if we put it another step with putting into action, we look at those particular agreements, those 3 agreements, in a practical way. There are 3 ways of trying to clean the channels of communication. Being impeccable with the word, don't make assumptions. Basically, I'm responsible for what I say. I'm not responsible for what you hear. And the reason why I say that is because I don't control your perception. I don't control your will. You do. That's when I say I'm responsible for the integrity and clarity of what I say. I'm not responsible for what you hear. I'm actually respecting you from that point of view. I don't control your perception, but I'm going to do my very best to share with you how I see the world. I'm aware that words have different meanings to different people. Being able to listen allows me to find that word that allows us to resonate. To make assumption is to not make the mistake that every words mean the same to everyone. Everyone's words are different. Don't take things personal is to not assume responsibility for someone else's will. Be willing to listen. I want to say something kind of hippie-ish, but changing the frequency of your language. It's like changing the intent behind your language in the sense that it is something that when you're able not just to assume responsibility for the integrity and clarity of what you're saying, respecting the other individuals, but ultimately it's about finding that language that allows us to understand each other. But the most important one is the one within myself. If I'm the voice that's talking inside my own mind when I'm thinking, who's listening? I am. If I'm the one who's listening, who's talking inside my mind when I'm thinking? I am. That's the individual dream. That's the relationship between me and me. You can say the relationship between my mind and my heart, or left hemisphere, right hemisphere, whichever metaphor we want to use, but it is that inner dialogue. If that relationship is in disharmony, then all my relationships will be in disharmony. But if I'm able to bring that relationship in harmony, then I'm the constant opportunity for harmony in all my relationships. So this is where the 4 agreements comes in, being able to shift the conversation or cleanse or redeem the active domesticator in my life, which is my mind. My father calls it the parasite, the judge, and the victim in the book, The 4 Agreements, which is the main problem that all our books addresses in different facets. That's the gem that it deals with. Someone in our life domesticated us. Someone in our life judged us. Well, we continue to use their words to go against us by continuing to believe it. As thus, it is my mind, the one that's talking inside my own mind, that's become the active domesticator. And that's only there because I continue to believe it. The best way to let go of conditional love is to forgive ourselves for ever saying yes to it in the first place. And that's where doing your best comes in. The last agreement, for me, is the agreement of unconditional love, is the willingness to see myself as I am today. Hello, my name is Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., and I do take things personal. I do make assumptions. Sometimes I'm not impeccable with the word. Sometimes I'm not skeptical at all by hook, line, and sinker. The 5th agreement is sometimes I don't do my best. Just ask my wife. She's my witness. Right now I don't have my wedding ring because I lost 20 pounds and it's falling off. So I didn't want to make it fall. But she is my witness. It's the moment where I stop pretending to be something I am not. Conditional love only sees what it wants to see. Unconditional love is the willingness to see the whole of who I am. So for me, that is the gift of the 4 agreements. That's in essence giving myself the permission to heal from my own conditioning.
And I think what I hear there too is the 4th agreement, do your best, is a pathway for forgiveness, because I can look back on my life and I have regrets of things I've said and done. And in a weird way, that's the best I had that day.
Yeah, that was the best. Yeah.
And I'm better now
Yeah.
than that. But that's all I had that day. The day I said whatever, I was younger, I had a couple beers, whatever. But that's all I had that day.
Yeah.
And with that, you can just say, I forgive myself. Today is today.
Yeah.
This is all that exists actually is right now.
Yeah. The only place that doesn't need me for it to exist is this present moment. This is the only truth that exists. Ironically, it's the only place where I'm able to express intent, which means it's a choice. It exists in this moment as a choice. Temptation only exists up until the moment of choice. You either gave into the temptation or you didn't give into the temptation. So how do you practice the 4 agreements? I accept that I take things personal. If I want to take it personal, I'll take it personally. I'm completely free to say yes. But I've read the book, I understand the concept, and I'm free to say yes to not taking things personal. This is what personal freedom is. And with that awareness, I choose not to take it personal because I don't want the hangover that comes with taking things personally. And it's a choice that exists in that moment.
Once you understand it's a choice, obviously you're going to take less things personally because it really hurts you. It hurts you more than the person that you are angry with or the person that you are offended by. One of those things too is I've tried to help people understand, because I was so powerfully moved by this book and I found myself kind of having little sessions where I would preach the gospel a little bit. A lot of people get hung up on the don't take anything personally because they attach the idea of allowance to it. In other words, what you're telling me is I'm supposed to allow people to abuse me? And it's like, no, that has nothing to do with it.
No.
You can still make boundaries.
Yeah.
You can still get a divorce.
Oh,
you
yeah.
can still quit your job. You can still tell someone, I love you as a fellow human.
Yeah.
Never call me again.
Yeah.
You can still
It's
do
true.
this. And I think there's sometimes people get hung up in that category. I get it, but I think some people are like, I know. And that's the thing. It's like to keep the anger to keep the resentment is a way to protect themselves. Because if I'm stay mad at you, therefore you won't do this to me again.
Yeah.
And they don't realize you can have them not do it to you again without the
Yeah,
anger,
exactly.
without the resentment.
A boundary is a very beautiful thing because as opposed to ego wants to protect the image of what I'm supposed to do, a boundary is I'm going to protect this being. I acknowledge to myself, this is what hurts me. And this is what I don't want in my life. It's a totally different act. It's an act of love for myself and the individual. It's those agreements that we talked about in relationships, that the only thing that'll exist between you and I are things we both say yes to. A boundary is the way we protect not just each other, but ourselves. A boundary is basically says, I love you. But if this happens, there's going to be a consequence. As opposed to, I love you if. If you live up to my expectation, you're worthy of my love. The motivator there is, if you want my love, you live up to this expectation.
Conditional love.
Conditional. I'm using my love as a motivator. The opposite of that is that I love you. I love you regardless. But since I've already used a Sex and the City quote, I'm going to use another one by Samantha Jones. This is my deal breaker. This is my line in the sand. If I use a Bugs Bunny line, this is my line in the sand. If you cross it, it's gonna hurt me. I still love you, but I'm gonna protect myself, and it's something that I'm not gonna disrespect myself with. But I still love you.
Yep.
My love for you is still there. But this is the consequence. And it's not I'm not using love as the motivator. I'm saying, this is my truth. This is going to hurt me. And I'm going to protect myself from that pain by this. If you can understand that subtle difference between, if you want my love, you live up to this expectation.
Right.
And thus you're protecting a wound with illusion, with ego, with personal importance. With this one, I'm admitting to you from off the bat, here's my wound that I haven't healed yet. Give me time to heal it. Maybe once I heal it, I'll change my mind. But at this moment, this is my wound, and I'm going to protect it because I don't want to feel the pain.
Well put. Well put. And that you answered it. I mean, and that's just something that has come up in just brief conversations with people who haven't really gone down the rabbit hole with the Toltec tradition. They hear that line and I could see it in their eyes. Like, are you kidding me? You want me to stop hating my stepdad who beat me when I was a kid? Screw him. And I'm like, well, and then I won't even say it. You've already said it, you know.
Yeah.
But yes, you can't have boundaries and still don't take anything personally.
Yeah. In any path of healing, the very last step is forgiveness. Now, I'm going to describe, like a teacher in Sacramento said this. This is not my line, but I love it. And I wish I remember the gentleman's name who said it, but it's beautiful. Forgiveness is the moment you no longer wish the past was any different. It is the moment you accept it and you let it go. I love that because it means that it's the moment you realize you can't go back in the past and change a yes to a no or no to a yes. It happened. It's the moment I accept it. I don't pretend it didn't happen. It happened. And I can't change it. To let it go, my brother, Don Jose Luis, my brother, who has beautiful tattoos, you'll love his tattoos, has this analogy of a scorpion that stings itself over and over again with its own tail, administering the emotional poison that it meant for someone else to itself over and over again. And imagine the day the scorpion decides to no longer sting itself. Someone once said, scorpions don't do that. And I said, exactly, scorpions don't, but we do. Every time we think of the past, we hurt ourselves over and over, administering the emotional poison that we meant for someone else to ourselves.
Right.
Letting go is the moment I no longer use the past to hurt me in the present.
I like the way what we resist will persist.
Yeah. Now, it's all about breaking domestication, right?
Right.
If we're not ready to forgive, we're not ready to forgive, and that's okay. In the path, in the journey to healing, if I'm not ready to forgive, that's my truth. But when the moment comes that I want to let go of this pain, forgiveness is exactly that step. I've had the opportunity to atone and heal some of my past relationships. I'm very grateful to have been able to heal the relationship with my first love. And for me, it was learning the difference between guilt and remorse. And guilt is punishing yourself over and over again for something you wanted to do. And if life were to give you a chance to do it again, you would still do it because that's what you wanted to do. And every time you think about it, you punish yourself like a scorpion that's over and over and over. Remorse is like seeing the ripple effects of your actions and seeing how your actions affected someone else. And like my friend Kirk would say, is the juice worth the squeeze? The answer is no, because all of a sudden you realize it's not worth hurting someone. If life were to give you a chance to do it again, you wouldn't, because the consequence is not worth it, because you're seeing the humanity of the other individual. Once you know the difference between remorse and guilt, then you apologize not seeking forgiveness. You apologize for atonement. Now, that's going to depend on the individual. That's going to be different. We're 7.5 billion, and all of us have experienced the full spectrum of things. For some people, it's going to be horrendous, and it's going to be very painful to even get to that point, and I honor that. There's people who are able to go through that process. And if you're not ready to forgive, you're not ready to forgive, and that's okay, you know? But in that moment where you really want forgiveness is the moment you forgive the individual as you forgive yourself. It's not gaslighting. It's reclaiming your power. Mm-hmm. I reclaim the power that I'm no longer letting that moment impact me beyond this moment. I'm going to learn from it. Mm-hmm. I'm going to definitely be wise from it. But I'm not going to use that individual's actions to hurt me ever again.
It's great. And, I love that when you said, if you're not ready to forgive at this moment, that's okay. I think sometimes when people are on the spiritual path, let's call it, there's this, there's a lot of pressure to just be enlightened. So enlightened that you can just, someone can hurt you and you're already beyond it. You've already forgiven. It's like, I'm Jesus all of a mm-hmm. sudden, or, Buddha. But that's not the reality for most of us, not for me. And you're right. It's okay to take some time.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully you get it done before you die.
Yeah.
You know, and I think most people, if they focused on these things you're teaching, they will.
Yeah.
But is it going to happen today or tomorrow, or even the next month? Maybe not. Maybe you just need to be with that mm-hmm. resentment for a minute and process. And that's important to acknowledge, right? Because there's a lot of pressure in the spiritual communities to just be enlightened, man. You read the book, right? Let's do it.
And you can see how the 4 agreements and the 4 conditions translate that to what you just said. Sometimes we corrupt spirituality in the same way. When the first time I heard the story of the 2 wolves, my brother told it from the Peruvian version of the Jaguars. Then I heard the Cherokee version watching the Tomorrowland, that movie with George Clooney. Mm-hmm. And I like that version, so I'll tell that one. It's like a grandfather teaches his grandson the Cherokee tradition mm-hmm. of 2 wolves. One is a wolf of love and compassion. The other one's a wolf of hate mm-hmm. and prejudice. Both wolves live within us. The grandson hears that and says, if I make him fight, which one will win? The grandfather says, the one you feed. Mm-hmm. Now, the first time I heard that, I thought, well, of course you feed the wolf of love and compassion. That's the image we're supposed to be. But as I became aware of what unconditional love is, which is to accept the whole of the yin and yang, mm-hmm. I'm both sides of that equation. I'm both sides of that light and the dark. I'm the shadow self as much as the other self. I am the one who practices the 4 conditions as much as I practice the 4 agreements. I am both wolves. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to feed both. The difference is I'm not going to make them fight. The war ends with me. And that's where unconditional love comes in, is the moment I recognize the way you control emotions is not by suppressing them, is by acknowledging them. What triggers an emotion sometimes can expose like a deep-rooted belief. Like an example, when my son was born, and I held him in my arms. I read what to expect when you're expecting. I took the classes. I can make a good burrito out of, my son. And to this day, he still wraps himself pretty tightly. I'm pretty good at that. I was. That day I held him in my arms. I was in bliss. I was holding him in my arms. I was feeling that connection, that beautiful feeling of holding your newborn baby. And it happened with my daughter too when she was born. But with my son, what happened is a seed blossom in my mind that was ripe with fear. Sudden infant death syndrome, SIDS. I read about it, I understood about it, and all of a sudden, my son could die from SIDS. And all of a sudden, my whole body, I felt a fear like I've never felt before. Like the only thing comparable to it is like the fear we have of losing our parents when we're young. All of a sudden, flip it, and it's more intense. The idea that like my son could die in my arms or in his sleep, which is what SIDS are. You know, like, sometimes I would go and move him. You know,
I did it too.
To his.
I had that same fear. I remember that same moment.
Yeah, exactly. My son's 17 years old, and I'm still doing it. Nothing changed in the room. I was holding him. It was just a thought that finally, a seed of a thought that blossomed, and it was full with fear, and it crippled me. It took me months to be functional, relax. To a certain degree, it's still there. You know, as a parent, it's will always be there to a certain degree. But at that time, it paralyzed me. I never experienced anything like that. An emotional reaction is like a car alarm. Someone triggered a wound, a belief, a condition that all of a sudden came up to the surface. The emotion is real. The fear, the anger, all that stuff is real. What triggered it may not be real. Now that it's exposed, I can begin to process it. I can begin to work on it. Now that it's in my periphery, in my awareness, I can do something about it. And that's what you can say the inner journey is, you know, spirituality or self-help or whatever, fill in the blank, healing is. We heal with our own permission. That is something that I've learned throughout, especially in the last 10 years. When I first started teaching, you know, touring after my first book came out, I was doing an event in Wimberley, Texas, and I went down to San Antonio, Texas, and a young lady gave me a ride from Wimberley to San Antonio. And in the ride, she told me her life story, and she was living my worst nightmare because earlier that year, her son had died. And all of a sudden, she began to berate herself and judge herself. What kind of mother am I? What kind of mother heals from the death of her own son? Now, I tried to help, but it was already, you know, she was already going down that downward spiral. But that's when I learned we heal with our own permission. If you have a wound in your hand, in your arm, if you give it some tender, loving care and leave it alone, a scab will slowly grow and cover that wound. If you leave it alone, the scab will stay there for as long as it needs to be staying there, and then slowly but surely it gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and eventually falls off, showing new skin or a new scar. But your body healed. Now imagine someone along the journey of that scab, you scratch at the scab, scratch, and it falls off and it bleeds. See, I haven't healed. Look, it's still bleeding. Well, you didn't give your body permission to heal. Your body heals with time and effort, or tender loving care, if you want to use that phrase better. If you understand the concept with our physical body, you can understand that with our emotional body, with our psychological body, with our traumas. We heal with our own permission. My brother Jose, Don Jose, says, in the Toltec tradition, there's nothing to learn but to unlearn. That's beautiful. It's perfect. What is it that we should unlearn? Everything that stops me from giving me permission to heal myself. And we're going back to my grandma Sarita. I heal with my own permission, and I'm using these instruments, these people, to heal myself.
And if you don't love yourself unconditionally, you won't allow healing to happen.
Yeah.
The wound needs to stay there because it's a reflection of your inability to love yourself unconditionally. Once you love yourself unconditionally, the allowance for the healing to occur just flows naturally.
Yeah. And there's people that we sometimes we have PTSD and we don't allow it. You know, for example, like I'm Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. and I'm not supposed to have any anxiety, but I do. You know, my son is going through a very rough phase in with his autism and anxiety. He's very aggressive, and we had a bit of a regression, and me and my wife are heartbroken by that, and we're dealing with that, and we're going through a rough patch right now. And if I really believe that image of domestication, that is the image of perfection, that is Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., I will never admit to it. But if I do that, then I will never heal.
Right.
Acknowledging this is how I feel.
I read your book. I'm almost done. I'm very close to the end. The Mastery of Self. And for me, it was great because in it you use so many real life examples, and I really think those are helpful. It's easy to read a parable or a philosophical statement, but it really hits home when you go, for instance, especially when you use yourself on occasion or any story. It's just like, because you can relate so quickly. And that's what that book did for me. Hearing the examples really helped. And also you have exercises in there. And to me, this is, you were just speaking about karate. I use that as an example a lot when I talk about embodiment, but you seek, you find information, and then you start practicing using that information in real life towards embodiment. And embodiment would to me mean when it's just natural. Like you talk to a guy who's been doing karate for 15 years and you ask him to do a high kick, it just happens.
Yeah.
And it happens perfect.
Yeah.
Well, there's a reason he's done that kick 25,000 times.
Yeah.
And
Practice makes the master.
Totally. Practice makes the master. And that's, I think, the mastery of self really came through. And I'm going to be buying the hard copy. I was doing audio because I want to kind of go through and do the exercises. Great exercises.
Yeah, thanks.
It's so simple.
Yeah.
You're writing it down, crumpling it. I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
you.
Yeah, I just think the embodiment is a huge missing component with some teachings.
Yeah.
It's just like you're supposed to just internalize it and think about it.
Yeah.
And if you think about it hard enough, if you understand it deep enough, it'll show up in your life. And the reality is no action, physical, get up and do it. You have to do it.
Well, it's the essence of my grandma. My grandma Sarita, abuelita, madre Sarita, said this. If you practice the Toltec tradition the way I or your father practice it, you're killing the tradition. We're just being parrots.
Got to evolve.
You got to put it into practice, because once you put it into practice, life becomes your teacher. You see, a consequence is not a punishment. A consequence is the result of an action. For every action, there's a reaction of equal force. If you see consequences in that way, there's neither good nor bad nor right or wrong. It's just consequences. What kind of consequences do you want? When you put into practice, not just the Toltec tradition, but all your traditions, like in art, music, film, your spirituality, your meditation, your yoga, anything, fill in the blank. There's something about being an apprentice that the only way you learn is not just from the book. In the book, someone's going to put into writing to their best of their ability, their experience. But it's still their experience. But once you put it into practice, it becomes your experience. And you're putting it into your own words. It's like, for example, in some of the workshops we do, I teach what domestication is. The very next morning in the workshop, I ask people, all right, in a group, what does the domestication look like to you? How has that impacted your life? How has that impacted your relationship? Because wisdom comes from putting into practice. I can't practice it the way Don Ezequiel did, because his practice was in the 1800s. That's where his life was, which is dramatically different from where Don Leonardo was. He grew up during the Porfiriato, the dictatorship of Mexico. And my grandmother lived through the revolution and the modernization of Mexico. My father lived through the 60s and 70s. My brother and I lived through the 80s and 90s. You know, we were raised on Nirvana and Caifanes and that kind of, the world of MTV, that kind of cable.
Not to mention the internet and your iPhone.
And that's actually my kids. Those are my
Talk
kids.
about a game changer.
Yeah. My kids now can receive knowledge so fast. My son with autism researches so much on YouTube. And my daughter as well. They both go down YouTube, Google, and all that kind of thing, and do all their researches. It's like it's both a wonderful thing, and it's a knife that cuts both ways. Of course, it feeds their anxiety just as much as it feeds their awareness, and you can go down the rabbit hole. The difference between a skeptic and a conspiracy theorist, you go down rabbit hole, only keep looking for a story that's going to reinforce your illusion, like Don Quixote. A skeptic is, to be skeptical but learn to listen. The fifth agreement is to hold back your yes, hold back your no, and listen. When you listen, you're able to reintroduce reason, which allows you to give scrutiny. If it survives your scrutiny, then you say yes. If it doesn't survive your scrutiny, then you say no. Usually with skeptics, it doesn't survive more than 2 or 3 steps.
I don't know where I picked this up, but somewhere along the line, I read a book somewhere, and in there somehow it said, it convinced me of the idea to believe nothing 100%, that I don't experience myself. Because to me, and I think that's leading towards domestication, I can be pretty sure that something, but my brother hates this one. He's always like, oh, really? So you don't think Africa exists because you've never been there? And I just to mess with him a little, I'm like, I actually don't know if Africa is actually there. I would have to go there.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's there. I'll give it 99% chance. But I need to, and that was one of the things in my DMT experience was I needed to feel I met the universe, God, the creator.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it the way I believe it now without doing it myself.
Yeah.
But I think it relates back to this fifth agreement, the being a skeptic, or instead of a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
But I like that. I think that's a powerful lesson. It's okay to listen. It's okay to take everything into consideration, but don't invest your beliefs, your truth in what you read, what you hear with the phones now. My God, the information is pouring in at 1,000 miles an hour. It's very easy to just subscribe. And then that becomes who you are. And meanwhile, you wake up one day and you might look back and say, wait a second. Why am I invested? And why is this part of my identity? I don't even know if any of this shit's real.
Yeah, exactly.
It could all have been a lie.
Yeah.
But I like that. I like the fifth agreement. And I read that one as well.
Yeah.
That came out after the four agreements, obviously.
Yes, my dad and my brother, Jose.
No, that was, you guys wrote that one together.
Yeah, my dad and my brother wrote that together.
Oh, I see. Yeah. I should have remembered. It's been years since I read that one, but I tend to use the four agreements as just just play it in the car, just let it roll.
Yeah.
As much as I know them all by heart, it's funny how easy it is to fall asleep again a little.
Oh, it's easy. Oh, it's easy.
So easy.
So easy.
For the fog to return.
And that's okay. It's like you go back and forth. It's a dance. If we use the image of our tradition, it's like there's a moment we let go of our conditioning and we go into our temptation, the plaza of the mind, and we're going back and forth between a pain that we're used to, using a Depeche Mode line, and letting go. And sometimes we just go back to what we know because it's the only thing we know. The expression my dad says in Spanish is borrón y cuenta nueva, which is erase and start again.
You almost have to do it every morning when you wake up, each day.
Yeah.
I've yet to have a day of my life where I went to bed at night and could look back on it and say, that was perfect.
Yeah.
I was enlightened all day.
Yeah.
I haven't had one of those yet. Even an hour. Well, let's just go minute by minute, second by second,
Yeah, that reminds me, like a teacher, once again, I wish I remember the teacher's name, but this was in Mount Shasta. She was giving a class and she said something. She was channeling an angel. And it was one of those festivals where we're all talking, and I was presenting there. And she said a line that was just phenomenal. The key to enlightenment is effort. As I sit back and I listen to that lesson, I'm like, effort is using the energy that animates this body to manifest something, to create something. Is always do your best. That's what effort is, to take a step forward. The key to enlightenment is effort. Anyone can reach enlightenment. It's not a select few. It's anyone who exists can reach enlightenment if they choose to walk in that direction. Discipline is remembering to apply that effort every day. That's it. Forget about the drill sergeant in your head. It's a choice, like you were just saying. Is remembering that morning to use my effort in that direction. That's what discipline is. It's just remembering to apply it. Success is simply following through. And that's how we change this individual dream.
Yeah. Well put. Quite simple. Easier said than done, as they say.
Oh, of course.
But still, it's right there for everybody to hear and know. And one of the beautiful things about the time we live in now, hell, 500 years ago, I'd have to hike up a mountain and meet some guy in a cave to hear this information,
Yeah.
Yeah. And now we can just flick open the phone and drive to work, and this great wisdom just coming to the speakers.
We have access to every ancestor in the world.
Yes.
And if we give it attention, we can learn from all of them.
Yes.
Of course, we have to learn to decipher, because there will be teachers there'll be teachers who teach the four agreements, and there'll be teachers who teach the four conditions. And they can't tell the difference, but they'll all call it the four agreements.
Right.
If you understand it from the point of view, you can say this is the moment you start coming to peace with your own tradition. Look back at who taught you conditional love and unconditional love, and make a choice for yourself. And that's when we begin to unlearn. And all of a sudden, The redemption of the mind is like the redemption of knowledge. I no longer have to corrupt that which the snake corrupted. In fact, the snake had nothing to do with it.
Well put, my friend. You are a Nagual.
Oh, thank you.
I can feel it, and it's an honor to sit in your presence. Thank you for that. I'm going to switch it up a little bit.
Sure.
I want to talk about tattoos a little bit.
Yeah.
You're going to get tattooed today.
Yes.
Before we get to that, before we get to what you're going to get tattooed, it's pretty awesome. I want to talk about have you been? You've been tattooed. You
Yep.
have tattoos. What's been your? Oh, there's Don Quixote.
So
Great
this
book.
is the basis. My first book, The 5 Levels of Attachment. This is the first lesson that came from it. You can say that's the beginning of my journey. It's the moment I realized I'm Don Quixote. I'm Don Quixote. Now, Don Quixote is a man who preferred the illusion over the truth. He read all the books of chivalry. And one day in his attachment, I won't even call it delusion, it's in his attachment to that image, he preferred the illusion over the truth because he didn't like who he was. He preferred that image. And he wanted so much, and began to distort everything. Luckily for him, it was noble.
Right.
What he believed was noble. And he wanted to see what he wanted to see. Don Quixote. He sees giants instead of windmills.
Right.
But he takes action. He takes action in his work. And he goes back and forth between it, of course. Every time he has a moment of life slaps him in the face, or a windmill throws him and Rocinante to the ground, he has a moment of clarity. When that happens, it's a realization of himself. I am Don Quixote. I am Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. I'm also Sancho Panza, because I know he's crazy, but I'm going to follow him just in case he's right. Because Don Quixote promised Sancho Panza, if you follow me, the king will reward you with so much treasure, he might even give you your own island. He wanted that. Yeah. He decides to follow him, even though he sees that he's crazy. So I'm Sancho Panza as well. I'm Don Quixote and I'm Sancho Panza. And here, the windmills represent the truth. We don't see giants, we see the windmills, the truth. Don Quixote, at the very end, right before he dies, he accepts that his name is Don Alonso Quijano, the truth. And that's me. This is a Picasso. And I got this done actually almost exactly 20 years ago.
Wow.
Which is...
And that's the last tattoo you've gotten. That's it.
That's
right
the
there.
first and last.
First and last. So
yeah.
It's been 20 years.
It's been
almost.
20 years. Yeah, because, the thing about it is my father always taught me that you earn a tattoo. Okay. It represents a moment. My brothers have tattoos and they represents their moments. It's beautiful. And I was the first one to break that mold, because when my mom saw this, she said, no, erase it, take it off. Mom, I can't take it off. It's done. So, as the oldest brother, I'm like, I opened up the gates and my brother's just...
It's all your fault.
Yeah, it's okay. Which is beautiful, because they both my brothers have beautiful works of art. If you ever get a chance to see their tattoos, it's absolutely gorgeous. Yeah. The next tattoo was going to be when I finished. If this is the beginning of my writing career, in the sense of the very first image that I had or thought that led to the 5 Levels of Attachment, my first book, I've completed the trilogy with Mastery of Life, Mastery of Self. With that one, I the next tattoo, and this next one, the fusion of two cultures. It's exactly what unconditional love is. The story I've told you about. I'm both the wolf of love and hate, but in this image is the conquest, a battle between a Spaniard and an Aztec warrior, and they're killing each other.
Right now, just to be clear, you're describing the image.
The image.
It's a painting you're getting.
Yes.
We'll show this in the video, but yeah it's a Spaniard. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's a Spaniard and an Aztec warrior.
Right.
In war, killing each other. They both have giving each other the mortal wound, and their blood is the fusion of two cultures, which is, in my case, the mestizo. The mestizo is my race. Mexican is not a race. Mexican is a nationality. Kind of like American or U.S. citizen is a nationality. Mexican is also a nationality. We are as diverse as the U.S. is.
Right.
My particular ethnicity is a race is mestizo, which is the fusion of European with Mesoamerican. According to the DNA thing, 75 to 25%. That's the ratio. 75% Mesoamerican or Native American versus 25% European, according to that thing,
Yeah.
and whatever that means. I speak Spanish. I speak English. If when someone says you don't speak so much Spanish, you speak more English. Well, in Spanish I have a stutter, so English is easier for me to talk. But if you're gonna reprimand me for not knowing Nahuatl. I don't know enough Nahuatl,
Just Toltec.
which is the Mesoamerican language of the Aztecs and the people of the Valle Mexico. But it's the yin and yang. To me, that image represents the acceptance of the two cultures I come from. I could have come from love, and I could have come from war, and I actually could come from both. Is the future of our tradition, because I don't teach the Toltec tradition as 100% pure. There's also Catholicism in it. I use a lot of the Judeo-Christian imagery that is surrounding our culture. The most beautiful example of this is La Virgen de Guadalupe. La Virgen de Guadalupe is a representation of Tonatzin, the Aztec goddess mother.
Okay.
She, like the Basilica of Guadalupe, is built on top of the temple of Tonatzin.
Okay.
So Guadalupe is the mixture of European, or
An Aztec imagery.
and an imagery, which is the majority of the population of Mexico. We have both. So to pick and choose, like I acknowledge my Mesoamerican tradition, and that's what I teach. But at the same time, I acknowledge the side of me that comes from the European and African, because according to that DNA thing, there's the African element of me. It explains the invasion of the relationship between North Africa and Spain and Portugal. The history of that.
There's a lot of people mixing up in that era.
Yeah. Don Quixote was written during the invasion. Miguel Cervantes was a prisoner of that war, and he wrote that as a prisoner of war during that phase. There's that side of me. So this particular tattoo represents the unconditional love of seeing the willingness to see all of that, but not just historically. That's just the superficial. It's also describing me within the the accepting the wolf of love and compassion just as much as I accept the wolf of hate and prejudice. And I'm not going to say which one is which. On that image, both are just intertwined. There's, like my grandma would say, there's not a sinner that wasn't. There's no saint that wasn't a sinner first. No hay un santo que era un pecador anteriormente. So it represents my journey, my journey in writing those books. 5 Levels of Attachment, Mastery of Self, Mastery of Life, as well as the 7 Secrets to Happy, Healthy Relationships, and Little Book of Wisdom, and the Little Book of Knowledge. All of that is my own journey. I'm sharing my journey of how I understood my family's tradition. All those things that we just talked about is encapsulated in that image. Now, of course, this is my interpretation. That the original artists envisioned that? Well, no. But it's more personal in the sense that it represents that moment of me where I choose to no longer make them fight. The war ends with me. Even though the blood that runs through my veins represents the history of war or invasion and independence and all that kind of thing, I choose to end the cycle of trauma with me. Mm-hmm. And how my kids choose to do that will be completely to themselves. If they choose to follow the Toltec tradition or not, they're free to do whatever. They don't have to. My brother and I could be the last of the line, and that's fine with me. Will I teach them if they give me permission to share with them? Yes. But it's going to be their journey. Like my grandma says, if you practice the Toltec tradition the way I practice it, or your father practice it, you're killing the tradition. Let it be their journey. One of my son's special needs teacher says, You put a life vest on them to keep them safe, but it's their job to take off that life vest when that life vest doesn't let them swim. Yeah. And our job as a parent is to step back and let that happen. So it's the trauma within me. I come up and I heal the wounds that conditional love left in my heart. Because the first time I read the 4 Agreements, when I was 21 years old, I bought it in a little bookstore in Berkeley, California. My dad gave me a copy, but I wanted to read the copy I bought because I've been buying records and books, and I wanted to be part of that, and I wanted to be that one. Around chapter 3, I put the book down. It's my dad telling me what to do all over again. What is it like to grow up with a spiritual father? We confuse the 4 Agreements with the 4 Conditions. You know, it's one of those things we do. But then life happens. I have my moment of clarity. You know, a moment of clarity without any action is just a thought that passes in the wind. A moment of clarity followed by action becomes a pivotal moment in our life. Sometimes life comes in and smacks you in the face, like Jose would say, or just have a moment of clarity, an aha moment, or whatever we want to put. Something happened to me. I lost someone I loved, you know, like by my actions, and I couldn't project. It's like a freight train that all the stuff I didn't heal came crashing in. And I picked up the book, the 4 Agreements, and I read it the way everyone else reads it to help. And I began to apply the 4 Agreements, the Toltec tradition, when I was 27 in order to heal myself. And that's when I became to peace with it. You know, it wasn't something my dad's telling me what to do. It's something my dad shared with me to heal myself. Someone asked me if the mastery of self means that you're happy for the rest of your life, and the answer is no. Like my grandma would say, if you want to make God laugh, tell her your plans. When life is good, you apply everything you've learned to enjoy it. When life is tough, and believe me, it gets tough, you apply everything you've learned to keep the story moving forward. I just saw there's a YouTube thing or TikTok thing that's happening. Like there's a circle of authors. So this one's actors. It's Tom Hanks talking to Robert De Niro and Sanders and all those wonderful actors. And he says, "This too shall pass. This too shall pass." Well, in order for that to pass, you apply everything you learned to move the story forward. You know, it's a beautiful way how Tom Hanks put it in that video, and I'm doing it injustice because by now my memory only remembers that part, but he says more. But if you, in the tradition you practice, be it Toltec, Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, psychiatry, psychology, many, many, many more. It's the beautiful, wonderful history of humanity that we have, many, many, many more. If we apply it, it could change our life. And it could heal us. And the way we do that is one day we begin to clean it. We no longer use it to go against us. We use it to heal it. So for me, this tattoo represents that cycle. For as long as I'm alive, life will be good and life will be bad, and I'll be going between the two. I'll create my most perfect hell and I'll create my most perfect heaven. But if I can keep applying it, I will not just learn, I will create a beautiful work of art that is uniquely my own.
Well put. Well put. I think it's safe to say this tattoo has some meaning for you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's awesome. That's beautiful. And this piece of art, which I've seen, I think we'll throw it up during the edit, is a gorgeous painting as well. That's really, you know, that hearing that whole thing, I heard a little bit mixed through there. Like, this is a hard one to say because some people have been the victims of very horrible things.
Oh, yes.
And so I want to give a caveat to those people. I'm not saying that it was okay that that horrible thing happened, but in some way there is that practice of it's all okay. Like you wouldn't be here without the Spaniards invading Mexico. I mean, the murder, the rape, the pillage, this is horrible, horrible things. Yeah. But would you be sitting here today if those things hadn't occurred? And that's the kind of thing I think you're talking about, these two wolves. Like you really can't assign good or bad to these two things. These are the dark and light. This is the yin and the yang. The universe, reality, this thing doesn't exist without these two forces. And how you balance that, how you integrate that, which one you feed, which one you don't feed, if you choose just to watch and let the two disengage. There's so many different ways to handle this, but it's all perfect, I guess. And again, I say that with the caveat that I realize there's people out there that I've been lucky.
Yeah.
I've had tragedy, but I haven't, I don't even want to say it on the show, but I haven't suffered the greatest of all tragedies that some people have. You know? So that's always a tricky one in the spiritual community when they start preaching everything is perfect, and you got some lady in the room who's like, my three kids died in a car accident last week. How dare you? You know, but that's not the point they're making. But I think in there you were making that point that you are what you are today because all the bad, all the good, and this tattoo in some way represents that as well.
And you know, with atonement and healing, you know, or whatever it is, it's we all have our own version. You know, it's like it's a moment where how long do I want to be suffering for someone else's actions? The war ends with me. Does that mean that I forgive, or that I let go, or that I atone? It's just going to be different for little things. But it's one of those things that in life, you know, I am blessed to have had the family that has brought me here, a family that has experienced very beautiful highs and very horrible lows, just like anyone else. And you know, we in humanity, we, you know, if what's that one book that Sapiens? It's one of my favorite books.
I read that recently.
Yeah,
very good book.
I have issues with people's names. I forgot the names of the author, but if you read, if you read both books of the Sapiens series, you know, we can see that, you know, how we humanity, we're just the product of the yin and yang. We're the product of all the good that's happened and all the bad that's happened, and somewhere in between, we learn not just to live with it, but where do we go from that? What do we want to create from that? Do we want to continue a certain cycle? Do we want to change a certain direction? There's nothing I can do to change the history, you know, and rewriting it doesn't serve anyone else any good. But what I do in my own personal journey, in my own personal life, now that is something I can control. I can heal from the wounds that happen in my life. I can heal from the wounds that happen within me, or own the actions I've taken and experience the consequences of my own actions, learn from my mistakes, admit and own my own traumas and anxieties just as much as I own my passions and my loves and my joys. I'm alive. And while there's life, anything is possible, including healing from the wounds of conditional love left in our hearts. Just got to give myself permission to heal. And if I'm not ready to heal, I'm not ready to heal. But if I am, let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me.
Yeah. Well put. Well put. I think that's a good point where we might want to just.
No, thank you.
I'm into that.
Thank you, Aaron, for the opportunity. Thank you.
Well, thank you for being here.
Gracias.
So we're not done. Okay, we're going to be back in these two chairs here in a little while, but we're going to take that break, you guys. We're going to head over to the other side of the room. By the way, Miguel's getting tattooed by one of the artists here at Guru, Lauren Sharp. The style of this piece isn't quite my wheelhouse, and it is hers. She's a wonderful artist. We'll show some of her work on the video. She's an amazing, beautiful spirit, human as well, which I was careful to choose all of our guys and girls here are like that, but I just think she has that energy frequency that you'll really enjoy being tattooed with and by. And she's super talented. So Lauren will be doing the tattoo. We're heading over to the other side of the room, and you'll meet her in just a minute. And then after that, we'll sit back down and have a high five before we take off.
All right.
Sounds good? All right, my man. Boom. Hey, everybody, welcome back. Before we get to this, I want to introduce the beautiful and talented Lauren Sharp.
Yeah.
Good work over there today.
Thank you.
It's not done. It's kind of a large piece, but the outline is done, and she's going to be continuing with the project here shortly. But before that happens, we were just going to have one little closeout. I kind of wanted to ask you a little, how was that getting tattooed?
Relaxing. Thank you. Thank you so much for taking care of me. I appreciate it. Lauren did a wonderful job. She started out in an area where, it didn't hurt so much. So she got the body used to that. And then little by little, she went to those areas where it would hurt a little bit more. But at that point, the body gotten so used to it. Then she went back to the normal. And then the part where it would hurt, the body was just so used to it.
Right.
So, yeah, it was wonderful. Thank you.
Of course.
Gracias.
Welcome.
Sign of a experienced tattooer.
I do my best.
Yes.
You know what I mean by that, though.
For sure.
You know, the younger tattooers, they just drop the needle right on the worst, most painful spot when they could have just got them a little warmed up, first. Sign of experience for sure. Well, good job. I want to say completely, but so far, and we all know it's going to go great. And we'll have photos of the finished product for you guys all to check out at the end, and photos of Lauren's work, because your work is phenomenal. It really is. I mean, maybe I have the chance to say this on camera, but I could not be more grateful to have you a part of the Guru team. Really.
Thank you.
And that, I mean, your work is one thing, but you as a human being, so kind, beautiful, and I mean, your spirit, and so thank you. Thank you for all you bring to this party. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I don't know what I do. I just till the soil. You guys plant the vegetables. I'm just the gardener. Maybe on the way out, I was thinking while you were being tattooed, what could I talk to him about before we end this for today? And in the 4 agreements, they talk about the fog, the party, the dream of the world. We're in our own, each of us are in our own personal dream, but we share that dream with 7.5 billion people. And I think it's safe to say that the world could use some improvement in the way of kindness, love, and cooperation. In order for that to happen, the fog is going to have to clear for many more. So maybe in your words, what would be some things on your mind about how that could happen for the planet? I mean, the book is certainly about the individual, taking control of your own dream, your own personal space and such. But when you think of the whole 7.5 billion people, what would you say to that?
Oh, you can't give what you do not have. It starts within yourself. So my father says, help me to change the world. That's something my father says a lot. Help me to change the world. Not the world out there, but the world in here. That relationship between my mind and my heart, or my left hemisphere, right hemisphere, whatever that dialogue is, to bring harmony to that. I can only give what I have, which means I'm the constant in every relationship that I am in. So once I have that peace within me, that's what I'm able to share, and it spreads. It's contagious, the way a yawn is contagious, a laughter is contagious, love is contagious, enthusiasm is contagious. So from that point of view, I'm a member of this community. I don't live isolated in a hill. I don't live isolated in a monastery where I've made a vow of silence. I'm a part of the community, and how I contribute to that community is my contribution to the whole big dream. So I teach with permission. If you don't give me permission to teach, you're not going to receive it. And that's fine. But the way you deliver a message it has to be done in a way that you are responsible for the integrity and clarity of what you say, but understand that you have no control of what another person hears. It's going to always be perceived by the individual's filters, how they see things. Understanding that, actions speak louder than words, but we use words to describe every action. So give what you're able to contribute of yourself. If you want to, that old slang, if you want to see the change, be the change, well, heal yourself, change that ability to heal that relationships with the people immediately around you. And that has a ripple effect with other people.
Well put. I had a feeling you would say that. Kind of a redundant question for me. I'm like, I bet you that's what I'll say. And I could probably echo that in a more direct way to to all of you out there listening, you know, everybody that you talk to says they want the world to be a better place. But you have to ask yourself, are you the person that says that and then cuts somebody off in traffic and gives them the finger? You know, because I've done that. I don't normally do that, but I'm not going to act innocent. In my life, I've expressed anger and frustration for impatience and people in my way. Yet I want to tell people I'm all about peace and love. So yeah, I mean, we all should probably pause and take a moment in our little small bubble that we live in. Where are we not being that change? It could be tiny. Just
little things.
Are you helping the person that's struggling with the grocery bag? Why can't you? Why can't you put yours down and just pick it up for them? You know, those little things I think add up.
At this moment, it also, the little things can be listening.
Good point.
Listening to someone else, because we live in a time where more than any other time, we're able to share our experience with other people. So listening to their journey, to their experience, to have compassion, empathy, is respect, is actually a way to change, because sometimes it feels like we're losing that. It feels like it. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. But it's all a choice. So just remember that moment of choice.
I think that's a great way to end this, everybody. Yeah. I think we could end this with, you had something more to say?
Yeah, I want to say thank you to Lauren for the tattoo. I think you appreciate it. She added an element to the tattoo that's incredibly crucial that I didn't even think about. In her design, she added a halo, kind of this gothic, like a church painting,
a church window,
exactly, around the halo, around the horse. And my grandmother's power symbol has always been the horse. So a horse in the family represents my grandma. You know, is that she loved horses. So the fact that now we have in the image a halo around the horse who's looking back at going, what are you two doing? You know, I look at the image and I was like, they're trying to off one another, whatever. But then you have this element of peace. So we were talking about how I'm both the wolf of love and compassion just as much as I'm wolf of hate. I'll feed both, but I won't make them fight. It almost seems like the horse is turning around with that halo saying, here's the word of peace. And that's how it brings. So thank you so much for bringing that element of the design, because it changes the whole thing to a certain degree. You know, it's bringing honor and respect to my grandma, which is, you know, for me, the horse, like that both tattoos I have has a horse and represents my grandma and her teachings. But just having that little element, you know, giving that, like tying my grandma's teachings to that image is, so I thank you. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. And I want to honor you for that. Thank you.
And it should be said that that wasn't discussed. You didn't tell her to put it there.
Yeah.
It just, you kind of thought, you just felt a need to put it there.
Well, it's funny. I mean, I've had that happen more and more and more often, where even just, I mean, I don't meet my clients before they walk in for their appointment. I just do consultations over email. But it's weird because maybe it's just an intuition thing, but I've had that happen so many times where people are like, how did you know that? I'm like, I don't know. It just worked out that way. And I honestly don't credit myself with that at all. I purely just think it's a universe thing.
I agree. 30 years I've had that happen to me so many times.
So many times. I think every artist has that happen.
Yeah.
Where it's like, I don't know, it just felt right.
We're all connected.
Yeah.
It's one of those little hints and a wink from the universe. Like, it reminds us we are actually all connected. And when you focus your attention on a person's name and they tell you, and even if it's just typed in an email, there's a part of you in that moment, you've connected, you know, through the ether or whatever it is. And suddenly you just decide, I don't know why I think this would look cool. And then you show the client and you're like, how did you know?
Yeah.
That was part of my family tradition. You're like, I kind of did it.
That's what I love so much about this art form is just building those like interpersonal relationships with your clients. And you have moments like that all the time. It's really cool. It's very fulfilling.
And the cool part is that she introduced two designs. One, the design that was truer to the original work of art. And then she says, and I have this one right here. And I'm going, oh, wow. You know, it's just like, okay, I hadn't even thought of that. I was blown away. Thank you. It was awesome.
That worked out perfect.
Yeah, it does.
I had a feeling she'd be the right one for this one. I was connected. I was like, I don't know. Laura needs to do this one. So thank you.
Universe thing.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we can leave today with some words. And I think the big one I heard today was compassion and empathy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's very easy to judge the other, but you haven't walked in their shoes.
Yep.
And to give somebody a break once in a while and realize they're seeing life from another perspective. And that's why you may not understand them, but just give them a little slack, give them a little patience, and give them a little love. And you'd be surprised how quickly people will soften up and come around and come to some agreement or collaboration or cooperation when you do that.
Yes.
Cheers to that.
Cheers.
Amen to that.
Amen. Cheers.
All right, you guys. Well, thank you both for being on the show, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. And stay tuned for our next guest. I'm not sure who it'll be, but I know it'll be awesome. Peace out from Aaron Della Vedova. Chats and Tatts for life.